Hello, folks, and welcome back to Jazz Appreciation. This week, we're talking about fusion. No, not physics or chemistry, but music fusion. R&B, singers, and Latin jazz. As always, folks, you can find this presentation on our Google Classroom in the form of slides if you wish to go through it at your own pace. Just as a caveat and heads up, I will not be reading through everything on these slides as that would be way too boring. And I will just touch on the key points in this presentation. All right, let's begin. So our first singer that we're going to be looking at as in a photo here to kind of start us off, as well as a little bit later on in the presentation, is Sarah Vaughn. Okay, she was called the Divine One in her praise of her peerless voice and musicianship. Okay, she was exceptionally popular in the 1940s and 50s and really drew in a crowd, especially, which is quite rare to have success as an African American female at this time, because segregation and discrimination and racism was still really part of the United States at this time. And a lot of times, even though Sarah Vaughan was so popular, it still made it quite difficult for her to actually perform in clubs, simply because of her race, which is really sad and really unfortunate, because those people missed out on a wonderful and beautiful musician. So, the late 1960s saw the rise of fusion between jazz and the rhythms, instrumentation, and the repertory of rock music. But fusions have always played a role in jazz history. For example, among African, European, and Latin American musics, fusion is the coming together of two or more different genres or styles of music. All musics take from other genres and styles. Every single genre and style of music borrows from one another to form their own unique style. Okay, up to this point, myself, and the information coming from all of these presentations. Okay, we've discussed jazz as kind of this series of chronologically ordered creative leaps, right? From swing to bebop to hard bop to avant-garde to for cool jazz to avant-garde to fusion now. Okay, but really everything is kind of borrows from one another, and really it does go in some chronological form, just borrowing from different styles and genres throughout the entire history of jazz. Okay, a fusion approach provides an alternative approach to the history of jazz in that it looks beyond jazz at the parallel changes in pop culture, including dance styles and the uses of technology and their interactions with jazz. Early jazz musicians played music and entertained audiences and employers in various kinds of commercial venues, very different clubs and concert halls, and even on the streets. Although jazz was always played for dancers, a gap grew between those who wanted to play jazz for its own sake and those who focused on, prevailing to the public taste, to what the public wanted. Okay, so that by the 1930s, jazz, right, this idea of solos and these really hot moving rhythms, was part of a broader pop music phenomenon of ballroom dance bands. People wanted to be able to dance to the music again, especially because they couldn't quite dance to the abstract art form of the avant-garde period in jazz. It's very difficult to dance to, and quite frankly, it is quite difficult to listen to. Okay, as swing faded away, it became clear that there were three additional stylistic successors aside from bebop. We've got rhythm and blues, so R&B, mainstream pop music, okay, and Latin jazz. So, R&B derived in the 1940s. It was an offshoot of swing called jump music that was focused on blues and fast tempos and humorous lyrics, very funny lyrics, and a lot of quick-paced guitar riffs. The music eventually came to be known as rhythm and blues, as the former term for this market, race records, which turned into rhythm and blues, which was popular music by African American artists intended for audiences, began to lose some cachet in popular trade magazines such as Billboard. And so they wanted to boost the prominence of this kind of old school African American style of music that derived from the southern United States to get it back on the billboards again. And one of those artists of this style, this R&B style, is Louis Jordan, an alto saxophone player, okay, and band leader. He had 60 hits on the top charts. Okay, very, very good jazz musician, and could play the new form of jazz, which is, in fact, fusion, right? To get people moving, get people dancing, but still having those roots in the old forms and traditions of jazz music that really derive from the swing period. And here we got Louis Jordan, and his group, the Timpani Five. Okay, and this was a big popular band at the time. Okay, we still get all of our typical instrumentation of all bands, but we also get a couple of not dancers or stage dancers, but we get two kind of like groupies almost that would follow this band around, the Timpani Five band. All right, we also get Ray Charles. Okay, born in Georgia, raised in Florida. Okay, an African-American jazz musician who kind of is self-taught. He's not classically trained in any way. He did go blind at a young age, and he became one of the R&B's greatest stars right up until his death in 2004. There was a film that was created based on his life called Ray, where Jamie Foxx portrayed Ray Charles in the movie, and he did a really good job at portraying how his life and his life experiences impact the way he created music. Now, he wasn't a great person. He treated women really poorly. But he defied a lot of kind of the stereotypical norms of African-American musicians at this time in the 1960s. He traveled to parts of the United States that were truly segregated, that were really quite racist, and he was putting his life at risk in the 1960s and going to play in these different parts of southern United States. He was run out of Georgia. Okay, they did formally apologize to him later on, but the governor of Georgia would not let him play ever in that state until the 1970s when they apologized. And here we have Ray Charles. Again, he was blind from early childhood. Okay, he was nominated, for a number of Grammys. He never won one, but he was nominated. And he really put the heart and soul in rhythm and blues music. We also get Jimmy Smith. Died about 15 years ago. Okay, very popular and influential as a jazz and R&B fusion artist in the African American community. And he used the organ, the electric organ and the piano in his style of music. And it gave this really kind of groovy feel to the rhythm and blues. And remember, blues music comes from life experiences, typically from hardship. Right? When we write blues songs, it's typically from a background of hardship and kind of struggle through life. And here we have Jimmy Smith, very, very great organ player. He loved the organ and the sounds that it produced, especially for that kind of deep, guttural, gospel-y style of rhythm and blues. Okay, singers in the mainstream. The 1950s are often referred to as the golden age for singers. There are 4 different factors that accounted for this. The return of soldiers. Okay. The advent of the movie theater, okay, and music being performed for that, for the movie theater. We get Nat King Cole, okay, whose songs were portrayed in so many movies, especially his L-O-V-E song, right? L is for the way you look at me. O is you're the only one I see. Okay, and so on and so on. And so a lot of his songs were portrayed in movies. Okay, singers from this period grew up with swing and maintained this connection we get Rosemary Clooney, okay, with Nat King Cole, who created R&B songs that became popular. They were on the Billboard charts and really took off with the advent of the television sitcom. We then move into Frank Sinatra, one of the most influential fusion musicians of this time period. Okay, very respected. He started out imitating his idol, Bing Crosby, who had that similar sound. Okay. But he also listened to Billie Holiday and really kind of formed this fusion of sound between Bing Crosby and Billie Holiday. Okay. Frank Sinatra is that old style crooner type singer that you would see in the old mafia or mob movies. Okay, that kind of laid back. He can be compared to the modern day Michael Bublé. Michael Bublé takes his style and a lot of his, the way he presents himself on stage after Frank Sinatra. Okay, and here's Frank Sinatra here. And then we get to Sarah Vaughan again. Remember her from the beginning of our presentation. Okay, very famous African-American singer who traveled throughout the United States, even in a time of great segregation and racism, especially in the South of the United States. She still found great success. All right, so now we're moving into the last kind of style, the Latin jazz scene. And that it comes from many, many different parts of Central and kind of the Caribbean area. And we're going to start out with Cuba. Okay, dance beats from the Caribbean have had a long relationship with jazz. Okay, this style, the swing style of jazz music, has some of its roots in this kind of Latin Caribbean feel to it. These dance beats of swing music come from the Latin world. Cuba, okay, influenced a number of different musicians with the rumba style in the 30s, the mambo style in the 40s, and the cha-cha-cha style in the 50s. Cuban bands then they came to the United States and they offered little jazz type music, but considerable rhythmic vitality. The rhythms that you find in Cuban rhythmic music, okay, you don't see it in any other part of jazz music. Okay, we've got Mario Bauza, Machino, and the Dizzy Factor, Dizzy Gillespie. Okay, took a lot of his styles from the Latin world, from the Cuban Latin world. Okay, the fusion of Afro-Cuban music, African traditional music, mixed in with that Latin jazz kind of rhythmic music, created this new style of Afro-Cuban music that was really popular in California, in Florida, in the United States. Okay, and here's Machino. Okay, we got Machino. He's seated way down here on the far right. Okay, he pioneered Afro-Cuban jazz music in the United States. Okay, and created many different Latin jazz music stars in Los Angeles, especially at the Brazil Club, which featured a lot of Afro-Cuban Latin style rhythmic music. Very rhythmic, very fun to dance to. Okay, and as you can see here, right in the middle, we've got Bing Crosby. Remember we talked about Frank Sinatra taking some of his, a lot of his style from Bing Crosby, that old kind of crooner style of music, that sound. Okay, here's our Latin groove. So if we're in 4/4 time, okay, denoted here I've given you, so each beat, so when we have a dotted quarter note in 4/4 time, a dotted quarter note equals 3 half notes. Okay? Right? And we can count it like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay? So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Da, 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Da da dum bum bum bum. Sa da 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 dum dum dum. Do da 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 da. Bum ba 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 ba. Ra cha 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 dum dum. Okay. Another Latin groove we have is the 3-beat 3-4-3 type groove. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Da 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 da. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Da 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 dum da 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 dum dee da da dum. Okay, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and yeah, so it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Da da do 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 do. Say do 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 do. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3. Yeah. So it's kind of like easy to dance to. Lots of syncopation off the beat. Syncopation, which is great. We get the Bossa Nova style. Okay. Jobim, Gilberto, and Getz. Okay. Created this new style of dance music that really went along. It's very fast-paced, has a lot of African roots and Brazilian roots, especially in the dance moves. But it's a very fast-paced style of music that is typically danced to in a ballroom Bossa Nova style. Okay, and we got Antonio Carlos Jobim. Okay, Jobim is a very great and phenomenal Bossa Nova player. His music launched the Bossa Nova style. And here we got Stan Getz and João Gilberto. Okay, Stan Getz, you will know, is a very famous guitar player. Okay, he actually developed his own line of guitars that you can still buy today. Okay. But very, very famous in terms of the very fast-paced Bossa Nova style of playing on the guitar. It would make your fingers bleed. I can't play it. But it is a phenomenally fast and intricate, complex style of playing. The salsa music, okay, like all Latin jazz music, it goes with a specific dance style, which is, in fact, the salsa. I'm not going to read through this, but you can on your own. We get Eddie Palmieri. Okay, vigorous new salsa style. He combined intricate Latin rhythms, modern jazz harmonies, and very imaginative solos or improvisations around that salsa style. Okay, and then we get mass media jazz. As jazz grew farther from the mainstream public, farther from the popularity of what it should be, it began to embody 4 different cultural cliches. Okay, the jazz was more for the urban city slicker, not for the country person. Okay, the sound of jazz, especially the saxophone, is associated with kind of easy women who are very easily swayed into dating or perhaps sleeping with. Okay, jazz is very adult and super hip and not for squares or people with glasses. Okay, and jazz musicians on a variety talk, and they're very educational and they're very educated. Okay, those are the cliches that were associated with jazz. That it was very hip, very hoity-toity, very non-traditional, non-mainstream, not for the everyday person. Which, as we know today, to not be true. Jazz is for everybody. We get Otto Preminger and Duke Ellington playing together. Okay, Otto is in the glasses. We got Ellington, who's closest to us here. Okay, they wrote scores, music scores for different television shows, for different movies. And Otto Preminger took his style, how do I say this? He really liked the sound of Duke Ellington, and they worked together quite often on movie scores and commercials and television show music. All right, whew, too much talking. That's everything for today, folks. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have an awesome week ahead. And don't forget, if you have any questions, fire me an email, and don't forget to answer our discussion question of the week. Have a great week ahead. Bye for now.